Hello, and thank you all for coming this evening. Welcome. Tonight, Empower Our Future is pleased to be presenting an Empower Hour on climate and energy with the Boulder City mayoral candidates. We're delighted to be joined by Aaron Brockett, Nicole Speer, and Bob Yates this evening. We acknowledge with respect as non-native people that the land on which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that our government, academic, and cultural institutions, and our nation itself were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, oppression, and inequities, and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, create, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. Let us seek to understand what it means to be in right relationship today with the traditional stewards of this land and with this land itself, and with all the creatures that inhabit it. And so now I want to go ahead and introduce this evening's facilitator. Steve Whitaker is a serial entrepreneur and an active member of the Empower Our Future communications team. He'll be handling the questions for the candidates. Thanks, Steve. Take it away.
Great. Thank you, Mary. So Empower Our Future is very grateful to the candidates for participating in tonight's forum. The candidates have received a list of topics on climate and energy for this forum in advance, but not the actual questions, which are based on input from the community. As you respond to questions, we invite you to include reference to climate justice in your response. I will change the order of the response from question to question. Each candidate will be given 1.5 minutes for each response, and a timer will be visible. Those not speaking, please mute. We invite each candidate at this time to make a 1.5 minute introductory statement. The order will be Aaron, Bob, and Nicole. Aaron, if you would, for up to 1.5 minutes.
Well, good evening, everyone. It's wonderful to be here with you on the Empower Hour. My name is Aaron Brockett. I am currently the Mayor of Boulder. I've served on the City Council for the last 8 years and as your mayor for the last 2. And I have lived in North Boulder for 20 years with my wife and 2 kids and 1 adorable dog, and been a software engineer and entrepreneur myself, a small business owner with my wife for 20 years. And so there are a lot of things that I care about in terms of city issues. I'm going to focus, I will say the top 3 things that I've been talking about are about improving access to affordable housing, compassionate solutions for homelessness, and then fighting climate change and mitigating climate harms to our community. So I'm going to focus in on that 3rd one tonight, because I know that's something that you all are very focused on yourselves. And I'll just mention that this is an area that I've worked in very deeply in my time on council, and in particular as in the last couple of years as mayor. And you all have did me the honor of having me on as your guest. I want to say it was about 8 months ago from Power Hour, and we had a great discussion, deep dive on energy and climate topics that I really enjoyed. So in my time, I have really prioritized coming up with specific and actionable plans for how we reduce our emissions in town and how we achieve our 100% renewable electricity goals, on-site renewable goals, and many more. And in that work, I've partnered closely with our Climate Initiatives Department. And so Jonathan Cohn and I are in regular conversations, and I have testified at the state legislature and at the Air Quality Control Commission on these matters, and weighed in on our dealings with the PUC as well. Also, a big supporter of our natural climate solutions that we're enacting, which I'm very proud of, the Cool Boulder initiative. And you mentioned climate justice. Part of the focus of that Cool Boulder initiative is specifically looking at lower income and marginalized communities in town and prioritize our mitigation efforts for those communities that have often been overlooked. So thanks for having me tonight, and I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Aaron. Bob, for a minute and a half.
Well, thank you. My name is Bob Yates, and I have been a member of the Boulder City Council for the last 8 years. Let me tell you a little bit about my background before arriving at City Council. I've lived in Boulder for 22 years in North Boulder. I'm a lawyer by training. The first few years I practiced law, I worked for the Omaha Public Power District, which some of you know, it was a public power company based in Omaha, Nebraska, and it was actually owned publicly. It was not a private company. It's formed in the 1940s, and so I learned a lot about energy and public power back in the 1980s and 90s, representing them. I then switched gears and became a telecommunications lawyer, and so I had the opportunity to appear before public utility commissions in a number of states around the country as we sought our licenses for this new telecommunications company. And of course, energy, electric utility here in Colorado is also governed by the Public Utilities Commission, so I know my way around those. The 8 years on council, I've had the pleasure of participating in a number of climate actions, and I look forward in particular to the future when we are going to be banning landscape equipment, banning natural gas and new residential equipment, and of course, maybe most importantly, supporting community choice energy here in Colorado. I look forward to working with the state legislature to pass that enabling legislation next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bob. Next is Nicole for a minute and a half.
Thank you. Is it easier if I wait until the timer restarts? Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Nicole Speer. I'm a mom to 2 high school students. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, and I work part-time at CU Boulder, where I've led a diverse team of technologists, scientists, and students for over a decade. I'm also a current city councilwoman, and I'm running to be Boulder's first elected mayor. I've done a lot in the past 2 years to help us move toward our city's sustainability, equity, and resilience goals. Together with my colleagues, I help seat a more diverse group of leaders to our boards and commissions and strengthen local democracy by making it easier for people to vote in city council elections. As a scientist, I've advocated for using data and facts to inform our decisions, especially the growing issues of homelessness and housing affordability that impact all of us. I've supported increased funding for flood and fire mitigation and initiatives like Cool Boulder that are making sure our city will be resilient as our climate becomes hotter and drier. I've advocated for longer-term thinking about emissions reductions by supporting the inclusion of embodied carbon in calculating emissions for new buildings. And as our city's representative to the Denver Regional Council of Governments, I've helped to bring in over $40 million to help reduce car traffic, get more bus service, and create more safety for people who are using our walkways and our bike paths. I know how our city works, and I've proven that I have the relationships with regional and state partners that can produce big results for our city. I'm looking forward to talking this evening about the issues that we're facing around energy and emissions and how we can make faster progress on addressing our climate goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. The order for the first question will be Bob, Nicole, and Aaron. As mayor, how would you use this office to influence energy and environmental policy for Boulder? Go ahead, Bob.
Well, thank you. Of course, I think it's important for all the listeners to understand that the mayor will, even though it will for the very first time be selected by the people, will still be one of 9 council members with an equal vote among all 9. And so the mayor, we do not have a strong mayor system in Boulder, and the city is operated by or managed by a city manager. With that said, I think that the mayor does have the opportunity to shape the agenda of topics that council talks about every Thursday night. And of course, the mayor does have the relationship with the county, state, and federal governments, and is oftentimes called upon to be the representative of the city. And so in working with our climate action team and with city manager, and of course, most importantly, with the mayor's 8 council colleagues, I think we can continue the very good trajectory on climate action that we have continued and have had for the last decade or so. And I think that the mayor will have maybe a bit of a bully pulpit to advocate in favor of some of the city's most pressing climate action initiatives. and certainly can speak on behalf of council when authorized to county, state, and federal governments, and even international governments about the great strides that the city is taking, and so that we can serve as an example to communities around the country and around the world on how we can have replicable and effective climate action. Thanks.
Thank you, Bob. Nicole, next for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. I love this question. And one of the things that I have noticed in becoming a council member is how much it matters when I show up in spaces where council members, maybe they haven't always come there, or it's a space, where somebody in the community, a group is trying to advocate for an issue, and you show up and all of a sudden the conversation shifts because, wow, there's a council member there. And I think about, the elected mayor as having this type of gravitas as well on an even bigger level. And so for me, this really comes down to where is the mayor choosing to spend their time, and where are they showing up at regional and state and national levels, because that's going to indicate what Boulder is really interested in. And so, if we are, I think most of you know, because I said this in 2021, I was a supporter of the Muni. I really love that idea, right? And where the mayor chooses to show up in those conversations is really going to have a little bit of an influence and signal where things are going. Now, the mayor is one of 9. And so the mayor always needs to be showing up for the goals that council has decided to pursue. But as a person who has to decide where your time is going, I think it'll be a really important job of the mayor to make sure that they are showing up in climate spaces, because that's a big goal for Boulder, and especially climate justice to align with our racial equity goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Now, Aaron, for 1.5 minutes.
Yeah, well, it's great comments by Bob and Nicole. And I think we do always have to keep in mind that the mayor is one of 9 council members with just the same vote as everybody else. But as Nicole pointed out, there's a certain gravitas associated with the title and the role. So the roles and responsibilities won't really change with direct election, but I do see how it can make a difference being mayor and showing up in spaces. So this is something I've worked on really, really actively. I touched on it a little bit in my introductory remarks. Is that there's an opportunity for close collaboration with our city staff and with our partners at different levels of government to really move the needle on climate initiatives at every level of government. So that's obviously we're implementing our own policies at the local level, but we work with our county commissioners on all kinds of topics. Like I would love to implement a new composting facility at the county level, for example, to improve our composting. And then our state legislators are great partners, and I'm actively involved in legislative matters and occasionally testify, as well as the Air Quality Control Commission. And then another group that's very important is the Colorado Communities for Climate Action, which allows us to leverage our efforts in the legislative area, in collaboration with the dozens of other cities and counties that have signed on to that. And so I've worked with them and testified with them as well. So I feel like Boulder is a thought leader in this space and can really pave the way and show a path. But when we do it in collaboration with all these other like-minded partners, that's the role of the mayor to really leverage all those relationships and make a real difference. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. The order of response for the next question will be Nicole, Aaron, and Bob. How would you characterize the amount of reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that can be attributed to date to programs or projects from the partnership agreement? What are these programs? Are you satisfied with this result? Go ahead, Nicole, for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. So one of the things that I think about when I think about the partnership agreement is that it is a little bit set up to not get us to our climate goals. If we are just sticking to what is in our climate, what's in the partnership agreement, we will not get to where we need to be in time. And so when I think about this, I think about what are some of the other things that we're doing beyond what is included in that agreement to help us meet some of our reduction goals. And one of the things that I mentioned in my introduction that I'm very excited about is as we are looking toward new development, really thinking about the entire lifespan of the buildings that we're looking at and how that is contributing to emissions, and thinking about the embodied carbon that is in the buildings. So I was really delighted to support that because it's a shift in our way of thinking that really gets us to a more accurate picture of where we are at. And if we are not able to meet our goals entirely through our agreement with Excel, what are the other things that we are doing to get there? I think that honesty about what we can and can't achieve is really going to be important. And so we can start thinking, about things like traffic mitigation and, how we're getting fewer reductions from cars and those kinds of additional types of reduction measures that we are working on taking in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next is Aaron for a minute and a half.
Yeah, and let's be honest here. I cannot point to a single pound or ton of carbon that has been avoided or emissions that have been reduced because of the Excel partnership. It has gotten off to an extremely slow start, and that's been really quite disappointing. And this would be a focus of mine, if I'm elected to another term, is that we need to kickstart this and start getting measurable results out of it, right? So, there have been some discussions and there have been some proposals and things, but we need to move forward with actual implementation of real things that are averting emissions. And I think I'd love to do it in partnership with the university, but we need to pick this back up and get it moving again. I will say that one thing that's promising for the future that's resulted in this in these discussions is this possibility of zero emission communities, which we may come back to later, where Boulder could actually bid on and purchase a renewable power generation source that Excel got in their bid for proposals and that they do every so often. So that's actually a potential way that we can get to our 100% electricity goal. And the pathway for that has been opened during our negotiations with Excel in the latest energy plan. So that's one thing that could come to fruition that I'm excited about that possibility, but we got to do better here. It's not producing the way that we had hoped. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Next is Bob for a minute and a half.
Thanks, Steve. Well, I'm a lawyer, and oftentimes agreements have kind of really hard and binding things, and then they have kind of soft, squishy things. And I look at the partnership part of it as a soft, squishy part of it. So Excel has committed to some carbon reductions and to selling us the streetlights and some other very hard and measurable goals. And obviously, we'll be holding them accountable to those as time goes on. And of course, we have some pretty important benchmarks in 2024 and 2025 that we'll be watching very, very closely. The kind of soft, squishy side of things was the partnership agreement. And that's not a criticism of those residents who are serving on the partnership board or of Excel for that matter. It was really a channel for communications. But I agree with Aaron that I think the promise of that partnership, the promise of that collaboration has not yet been realized. And I would as we get closer and closer to some of those measurable goals that Excel must comply with, I would hope that Excel would pay a little bit closer attention to the partnership arrangement and the collaboration in that channel, so that we can have some of the things that we talked about when we put the settlement agreement together in 2020, as far as planning, as far as microgrids, as far as zero emissions goals. And so that it's an avenue, it's a channel for communications. It has not been realized yet. It's still open. I really appreciate those in the community who serve on that. And I hope that as we move into 2024, it can be better utilized.
Great, thank you, Bob. The order of response for the next question will be Aaron, Nicole, and Bob. The Excel Boulder franchise agreement allows the city council or a vote of the people to terminate the agreement on or before December 15th, 2025, at its arbitrary discretion. As mayor, would you put the matter before the city council? Would you put the matter to a vote of the people? Why? Let's begin with Aaron for a minute and a half.
Great, thanks. So of course that's a little over 2 years in the future. So I wouldn't commit to an exact course of action right now, because I'm not sure exactly what the future will bring. But I think that having that in there, part of the reason why that was put in the settlement agreement was so that Excel knew that there were consequences if they didn't live up to their side of the bargain, right? So if they suddenly were firing up new coal plants and their renewable percentages weren't coming anywhere close to what they had promised, and they weren't working with us on partnership agreements and such like that, we could say, look, okay, we're back. We're going to go back to the municipalization possibility. And so I think it's really good to have it as leverage. Of course, we know that the last few years, the municipalization effort, I was a supporter all the way through. But of course, they got mired in very severe legal tangles, and we spent many millions of dollars. And Excel, unfortunately, has lots of money, lots of lawyers, and lots of time. So I wouldn't rush into repealing the franchise, but I think it would be extremely good leverage to get more concessions out of Excel, and particularly to kick the partnership into full gear. And so that would be my primary way that I would exercise that. But it needs to stay on the table in case things go really badly and Excel isn't living up to their commitments. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Next is Nicole for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you. It's a tough question, right? If city council is working with transparency and we are being open about the types of outcomes that we are expecting to see to make that decision about whether or not to continue after 2025, then I think we don't necessarily need a vote of the people. I think it's only if we are not being transparent in what it is we're trying to achieve that the voters, may really desire to weigh in. To that effect, I mean, the things that I am really interested in is, are we meeting our goals? Are we on track? What are the outcomes that we are looking for to see if we are going to make it? And how else can we bring in some mitigation strategies to offset the portion that we're not going to make? But also, I'm more and more interested in the idea of rates and how Excel's rates are impacting our community as well. Because in theory, the energy should be cheaper to generate as we move more toward renewable and sustainable energy. And so why are the folks in our community not seeing those increases seeing those decreases? It is kind of an increasing point of frustration as it's getting harder and harder to live in our community. So there are some other things that I would like to open up in a conversation about how Excel is helping out, especially our lower income communities that are struggling, that I would like to see come into some of these conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next is Bob for 1.5 minutes.
Thanks, Steve. And this is exactly why we put termination clauses in contracts. As a lawyer, we do this all the time, and you want to focus the mind of the party on the other side. If they're going to make some commitments, and of course, Excel has made a long list of commitments to our community, you want to make sure that you have some leverage and and give them some downside for failing to meet those commitments. If it was just a promise that we'll try, that's not very enforceable. And so the city's ultimate leverage is the ability to terminate the franchise agreement at the end of 2025, effective at the beginning of 2026. And of course, we have those termination rights at year 10 and year 15 as well. So it's not just a one-time deal. And this is why we very intentionally put this into the franchise agreement. As Aaron said, we were running into some legal and financial challenges on the municipalization, so we put that on pause. However, we preserved everything in the status quo as it existed in 2020, and we can pick up where we left off starting in 2026 if Excel has not made us happy, and it could be in any number of ways. Climate, carbon reduction, pricing, partnership, microgridding, all the things that they committed to do in that agreement will come to focus in 2024 and 2025. And I'm sure folks from Excel are probably watching tonight. I hope they are. And so they know that there is this trigger. And if they don't keep the city happy, the city may very well terminate.
Thank you, Bob. The order of response to the next question will be Nicole, Bob, and Aaron. City policy is to support community choice energy, CCE, legislation, which would allow communities to purchase electricity in the wholesale market on behalf of their businesses and residents. Do you support CCE? And will you be willing to use the city's influence to see that legislation is passed to enable CCE? We will begin with Nicole for 1.5 minutes.
Yes, I very enthusiastically do support CCE, and this is one of the things that Aaron was speaking to a bit about the mayor's role really being a voice in the broader state conversations about the issues that the city is supporting. And so this is something where, I think going out and speaking with some of the other groups that are working to make this forward, finding out, what kinds of things they most need from the mayor and from the city of Boulder in order to move their legislation forward. And then just being willing to go to those spaces and show up and advocate for what is the city's goal. So this is something that I expect there's going to be broad agreement on from everyone, really just being a champion for this concept at the state level. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, we'll hear from Bob for a minute and a half.
Well, Nicole is absolutely right. I think there's broad agreement on this. This is something that I've supported since day one. I worked very closely with Representative Hooten when she brought this forward, the study bill forward a couple of years ago. As a matter of fact, I went down to Denver and testified on behalf of the study bill. And of course, results of that are now before us, and we're now moving on to enabling legislation. Representative Hooten has retired, but Judy Mabele and Kyle will be bringing this forward on the baton has been passed. And I've already committed to Judy and Kyle that I would go down to Denver again and testify in favor of enabling legislation for CCE. Our city council is on record and under resolution 1276 passed in 2020 is supporting CCE, and I would want our new council to reaffirm that. As a matter of fact, I was delighted and honored to sign that resolution because our mayor happened to be unavailable. Assembly was unavailable that week, so I signed it on behalf of the city and on behalf of the mayor. I was a deputy mayor back then. And this is so important to our community because it goes back to the last question, Steve. This is about leverage, and it's about holding our utilities accountable on reliability, on pricing, and most importantly, on carbon reduction. And if we have the choice to shop around, that competition will drive our utility to be better in all three of those areas. And if they're not, we would then move on to an alternative provider. And there's a lot of dollars at stake here. And I would hope that we'd be paying attention to CCE and understand that they have to be good to us for us to continue to choose them.
Thank you, Bob. We'll next hear from Aaron for a minute and a half.
Yes, I'm going to agree with my colleagues here. Yeah, 100%. Big supporter of the CCE concept and legislation. Bob outlined some of that history. Representative Hooten worked really hard on this bill, and the city supported her all the way. I did personally. The city did as an organization. And actually, when she announced her retirement, one of the first things I thought of was like, what's the next step for CCE with Edie not there? But of course, people are picking up the ball, and that study bill, of course, the study did come out a while back, and now I'm very excited to hear that legislation is planning to move forward in the next legislative session. I've been in conversations with Larry Milosevic, who's been working on this as a lobbyist, and as well with former representatives Hooten and Mike Foote as well, who are working hard on this effort. In our council, I am very, very confident we'll continue to support it. I'm individually very supportive. We'll be excited to testify down at the Capitol when the legislation comes forward, if I'm in the mayoral role. And it is, I think, a phenomenally promising way for us to get to our 100% renewable goal, and for all the reasons that have been described. So 100% yes.
Thank you, Aaron. The order of response to the next question will be Bob, Aaron, and Nicole. Do you think the city is on track to achieve its official climate goals? Which city energy and climate programs would you prioritize to meet these goals? And how would you accelerate them?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. I'm a little bit worried that we're not. We have a very ambitious goal to get to 100% by 2030, and that clock is ticking very quickly here, as my clock is ticking. And I'm concerned that while I think our megawatt solar goal will be reached, I think we're a good part of the way there, and I think that will be reached. I'm a little bit worried that our reduction goals will not be reached. We do have a few things coming down the line next year. They're relatively modest around natural gas usage and fossil fuel usage around landscaping equipment. But I think that our goals with respect to operation of buildings is something that we need to prioritize. We do need to put more money into solar incentives so that more and more commercial and residential buildings will convert to solar. And of course, we need to step it up with respect to electric vehicle charging stations and other things. that will enlighten people about the potential for electricity to drive everything we do. And of course, the source of that electricity is the most important. And that's why we go back to the franchise agreement, because our electricity is only as clean as our provider. And that's why the CCE is so important. That's why the franchise agreement and holding Xcel accountable to the numbers they promise is so important. I do worry that we are running out of time here. And I think this is something that the next council in 2024 should be sitting down with city staff to figure out what we need to do to recover. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. We'll next hear from Aaron for a minute and a half.
Yeah, we have ambitious goals, and rightfully so. I think for the 100% renewable electricity, I think we have two promising pathways that we've already talked about. Hopefully the community choice energy, possibly the zero emissions communities as options. If neither of those comes through, that's going to be tough. But we also have ambitious goals in emissions overall, and so that's going to take additional measures, like, for example, the thing that we're, I think, going to pass in December, which is requiring electric-only construction for new residential and commercial construction. That was a proposal that I put forward when it came to us in a study session back a few months ago, and really appreciated getting almost unanimous support, including from Bob and Nicole, on that proposal. So that'll be a good step. I think we have things to do with landscaping equipment that'll make a difference. But we do have to look at the overall picture holistically. And so I mentioned composting earlier, right? That's a significant source of greenhouse gas emissions is landfills. And currently we're moving backwards on our compost collections because of the problems with A1 organics. So one of my priorities in that area would be, as I mentioned, to partner with the county on doing a local facility that's more mission driven, where we can get more high quality and a wider variety of products into compost collection instead of going to the landfill. So it's still hard, it's challenging, but it's doable, and I'm confident we can get there. But it's going to require eyes on the ball and all hands on deck.
Thank you, Aaron. We'll next hear from Nicole for a minute and a half.
Thank you. I'm not sure that we're on track to meet our goals. Meeting climate goals is a pretty hard thing for the United States and other Western countries. We're already counting on a lot of heavy energy use reductions, so we really need to go above and beyond what we promised in terms of energy use reductions through even higher energy efficiency standards, thinking about how we are shifting our transportation systems, as well as moving toward reduced consumption. I think that there's work we can do to move toward a more circular economy, to be thinking about adaptive reuse of materials as we are taking things out of older buildings and decommissioning older buildings, and really thinking about embodied carbon as we are putting things back together. We can look at more land regeneration and more carbon sequestration, even in our buildings. So thinking about using timber within our buildings and how we can share that with our wildfire urban interface or wildland urban interface status, but just thinking about how we are storing carbon within the things that we're building, and just thinking about how we can eliminate plastics altogether, because when we get there, we are in a much better place with regard to emissions. I think it's important, though, as we do all this, that we're not moving so fast that we're forgetting the voices who are often not represented in our decision-making spaces, because it's youth, it's Black, Indigenous people of color, lower income people. These are the people who've had the least impact on getting us into this climate crisis, and we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is going to be, is not going to be done additionally at their expense. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. The order of response for the next question will be Aaron, Bob, and Nicole. Nearly 23% of the city's total emissions are from burning methane or natural gas. Currently, nearly all space heating within buildings in the city is from natural gas. What changes to building codes would you favor to reduce this source of greenhouse gas emissions? Would you support a ban on natural gas in all new construction? We'll first hear from Aaron for a minute and a half.
So, by the way, thanks for shifting up the order and the direction of the questions. Nobody else has done that. That's really well done. Thanks, Steve. But yes, I just was talking about this. I'm very excited about our initiative when we pass our energy codes, probably in December, to ban natural gas in new construction. Our energy codes are going to be pushing forwards in a lot of different areas, and this is one of the most important ones. So really looking forward to us joining just a handful of progressive communities across the country who've taken that step. And there's a little bit of legal risk that we've heard about, but I think it's absolutely worth doing. And I think other communities will be joining us soon. But it's not the place to rest, because that's just new construction. So we have to rapidly electrify our building stock as well as our transportation mechanisms. Maybe we'll get to that later. But in terms of our building stock, we actually have, what we're looking at is how can we eliminate natural gas infrastructure in an entire sector of town. So for example, there's an aging gas main in the downtown area that's going to need an expensive replacement sometime in the next couple of years. And so we're looking at, like, how could we electrify every building that's currently on that gas main? And so that instead of adding new fossil fuel infrastructure at great cost, instead they can just turn it off, right? And so it's that kind of tactical intervention to electrify existing infrastructure that I think we really need to take advantage of. And of course, the good news is that we have enormous incentives from the Inflation Reduction Act at the federal level, and at the state level, they've passed enormous incentives as well. Shout out to the governor's energy office that's worked hard on that. And combined, Colorado has the best incentives for heat pump and other electrification measures. We got to take advantage of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Next, we'll hear from Bob for a minute and a half.
Well, I'll just pick up where Aaron left off, because Aaron said everything that I would have said as well. First, I'm fully supportive, and I intend to vote for, as this council disbands in December, the new energy code that would prohibit gas appliances and gas heating in new buildings. But of course, that's not enough, because we already have 47,000 dwelling units in this town, and several thousand commercial buildings. And the question is, how do we help those owners shift to electric use as well? There's an equity component here. We simply couldn't say to existing apartments and homes, you must switch to electric tomorrow, because there's a tremendously large expense. And so, using both state and federal resources, we can assist those owners in their conversion. Plus, of course, we have our own $6.5 million per year climate tax, and we use that already to assist homeowners and apartment dwellers in their own conversion, both in educating them and also providing subsidies to them and helping them make a transition. This will be a decades-long transition, I'm sorry to say. I wish we had started this a long time ago, but we didn't, and here we are. I'm glad we're taking the step of prohibiting natural gas in buildings going forward, and our next step for the next many years is converting existing buildings away from natural gas and to electric, so that we can look back many years from now and say that we did our part.
Thank you, Bob. Next, we'll hear from Nicole for a minute and a half.
Thank you. It's always hard to go last when you all agree. Everybody's already said all the things. But what I'm going to add, yes, absolutely. Definitely in support here. And I think, what Bob and Aaron have both said about, getting real creative with incentives that we can offer to get more people to make this transition, to get entire areas of town to make this transition, getting really creative with the funding sources that we are pulling from as well. And then really thinking about, as we're starting, can we start first with the people who need it the most? Because we know that there's also some health impacts of having natural gas in your home. The one thing I will add to what Bob and Aaron both said is that this is a place where I feel some state advocacy and work with our state representatives and senator can really make a big difference. And I'm going to point to our colleague, Junie Joseph, Representative Junie Joseph. This last year, she passed a bill that made it so that insurance companies would have to allow homeowners to replace a gas appliance with an electric appliance if the person was submitting an insurance claim, which is a small tweak but big impact. And I think that's one of those things that is helping our community members here in Boulder, but also having a bigger impact at the state level. And I think as we're working on those state level partnerships, we can really start to, as some folks mentioned earlier, model for the rest of the state what it looks like to move toward a climate future. We all support. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. The order of response to the next question will be Bob, Nicole, and Aaron. Transportation emissions represent 37% of the city's total emissions. to meet our city's goal of a 70% total emissions reduction by 2035, what policies would you champion regarding transportation?
Well, several, and I'll touch on some, and I'm sure Aaron and Nicole will add on to the list. Electric vehicle charging stations, of course, are super important because we need to make it easy for people to charge their vehicles once they've made that purchase. If we can subsidize the purchase of those vehicles, all the better, although there are some great state and federal programs already in place. And of course, getting people out of big vehicles altogether is even more desirable, because not only is that good for the environment, it's good for the health of the person who's moving around. And so I'm very proud that the city adopted a e-bike rebate program this year to help residents purchase e-bikes. E-bikes seems to be the way of the future, because it's a very effective and efficient way to get around in our small town. Our weather's usually pretty good, and we can haul groceries, we can haul kids, and we see e-bikes adoption increasing significantly. We want to continue that by subsidizing, especially low-income families who want to purchase e-bikes and actually leave their cars behind entirely. So, our first choice is that they ride an e-bike, and if they need to haul something really big, that they get in their e-car and drive. And both of those need to be super easy. And of course, we always want to encourage people to walk. This is a small town, and things are not that far apart. And we want to continue to remind. I was part of a pedestrian advocacy group a few years ago, and we want to continue to remind people that walking is the most healthy form of transportation, and it emits no carbon other than what you exhale.
Thank you, Bob. Nicole is next.
Thank you. So yes to everything that Bob just said. And what I would add there is that so much of the transportation in our city, it is also people who come in to our city because they are not able to afford to live here. And this council has really agreed a lot, and we made some really big progress on some of our housing related goals to try to, over time, reduce some of the increases that we're seeing in housing costs that are making it really challenging for a lot of people to live here. So this is one of the reasons that I support raising the minimum wage, for example. I think that's going to be a big push of this next council, hopefully. And the other thing that I think we really need to work on is just to make our community feel more inclusive to folks who are currently choosing to live elsewhere, because it doesn't always feel safe and inclusive to be here in our community as a person of color or a younger queer and trans person or something like that, some other historically marginalized identity. I think, we can absolutely keep making progress on improving our public transit systems, our bike paths, our walkways. I would really love to see us focus a little bit more on universal design of some of our transportation corridors, where we're thinking not just about ADA requirements, but also how are we designing transportation spaces for people who are dealing with mental illness or neurological disorder or some other sort of impairment that makes it hard to get around. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next is Aaron.
Yeah, so my colleagues had good things to say here, and I'll just add some. Certainly, transit is a really big part of this. So this is something that I've worked hard on in my time on council, and we just recently got a $25 million federal grant to build bus rapid transit between Boulder and Longmont with a regional bikeway. And so that'll get under construction soon and be up and running in the 2 to 3 year period. So I'm excited about that. We're working on a bus rapid transit plan east on Highway 7 on Arapahoe that I'm looking forward to. And we're working on getting RTD to bring back the service they discontinued during the pandemic. We just recently got the first FF2 express service back from downtown Boulder to downtown Denver. So we're working with them every day on getting that service back. I just had a regional meeting with the director there, Deborah Johnson, and we were all encouraging her in that direction. She promised to move as quickly as she could. And then, improved biking. We're just a ribbon cutting this morning for a double underpass at 30th and Colorado and protected infrastructure over there, right? So as we make these improvements to our alternative to vehicles network, then people can walk and bike more safely and they'll get out of their cars. But I also saw a question in the chat about the relationship between housing affordability and availability and emissions. And that's so critically important. And so part of my goal has always been to add density along our transit corridors, like put dwellings where people can walk and bike and take transit for their daily needs. And so where people who live in town, who work in town, can also live in town. And that is a drastic source of reduction for transportation emissions. So we got to keep working on that as well. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. The order of response to the next question will be Aaron, Bob, and Nicole. Looking ahead 10 years, paint a picture of the changes residents and commuters would see in their everyday lives because of the changes that would have occurred because of local actions and regulations taken to reduce greenhouse emissions. Go ahead, Aaron.
That's an interesting hypothetical here. 10 years from now, well, of course, the problem is that the climate crisis is already upon us. So I would love to paint a beautiful picture of 10 years from now where the temperature has gone down and everyone's living in peace and harmony. But the reality is that our climate is warming, and as much progress as we can make, it's still going to happen. So I actually have to emphasize the need for climate resilience. Because we are in a warming world. The fires are getting worse, the floods are getting worse, right? So what I see in 10 years from now is I see a community that's more resilient to the shocks and changes that are to come because of the policies that we're working on, right? So one where we've thinned our forests and our ecosystems are healthy and not prone to fire, where we have flood mitigation that protects our communities in the most natural way possible, where we've added to our tree canopy, right, where to mitigate the warming that's happening in our community, and with a strong focus for both the tree canopy and our Cool Boulder initiatives and the flooding mitigation on vulnerable communities, like the most vulnerable members of our community who are lower income or communities of color and often don't have the resources to provide those themselves. And it's our natural climate solutions, are moving forward, pollinator habitat. So I imagine a community that has come together to mitigate our emissions, but also to be resilient and healthy in the face of our warming world to come. Thanks.
Thank you, Aaron. Now, Bob.
Steve, I like to be optimistic. So let's imagine a morning 10 years from now in 2033, and I open up my electric newspaper, and there's been an announcement by world scientists that we are finally starting to bend the curve on climate. We haven't gotten there yet. We've started to reverse that what seemed to be back in 2023 an irreversible trend toward disaster. And after I finished reading that great news on my electric newspaper, I can walk down the street to a nearby bodega because we've created 15-minute neighborhoods where the things that I might need, whether it's a loaf of bread or a cup of coffee, are just a few minutes walk down the road. And then I would climb onto my electric bike and perhaps ride to a nearby park, or maybe to a nonprofit that I want to work at. And others are showing up by bicycle, or even those who come from a greater distance, an electric vehicle. And where most of the people who work in town actually have a space to live in town, where we've created equitable housing for those who want to be here and who do in fact work here. So I want to envision a beautiful future. Maybe that's a little bit more than 10 years out, but I do think that the actions that we take today will have direct impact on the results of our world tomorrow.
Thank you, Bob. And now, Nicole.
Thank you. I'm going to say these things, but probably like Bob's and Aaron's, they're going to be a little more than 10 years if we're really thinking realistically. But when I look out into our future, one of the things that I am deeply hoping for is that we have begun to heal some of the broken relationships that our ancestors and predecessors here in Boulder created by coming in, stealing the land, extracting and exploiting everything that we could from the land, treating each other as commodities that we could also extract and exploit labor from. That we've really started to recognize how harmful all of those things are to our ability to exist as a species and for this planet to be maintained as well. And so in that context where we're starting to heal, one of the council candidates, Taisha Adams, uses this language quite a bit about healing our relationships with ourselves and the planet. We are doing these things like wildfire prevention, and we're doing it through a return to some of the native land stewardship methods that have been used for millennia before we arrived and things started to go awry. We've got clean air that we can breathe because we don't have as many wildfires and we don't have as many cars on the road, and our children are not getting sick from having to breathe unclean air. We have thought about how we're conserving water and doing more absorbency in our landscape design and just so many other things. But for me, it starts with that focus on equity. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We're nearing the end of time. We'd like to ask each candidate to make 1.5-minute closing statements. The order will be Nicole, Aaron, and Bob. Go ahead, Nicole.
Thank you. And thank you for just being so on time. You all are great with this. But thank you everybody who joined us this evening virtually. And thank you to the Empower Our Future organizers for putting this candidate forum together. It is always such a fun and informative forum. I want to close by telling you about one of my favorite things that I've seen while I've been on council for the past 2 years. It's an agrivoltaics project up near Gateway Fun Center where 28th and Broadway come together. A few different groups work together to turn the spaces in between the solar arrays to a garden that is growing native herbs for a local business. So it's become a place for nearby low-income communities to get affordable, clean, renewable energy. It's a place for a small business to grow local herbs, and it's a place where the land is being regenerated. It's also a place where community members are coming together. And to me, that's such a beautiful example of what the future can be if we're working together with each other in the land. So my primary goal as an elected official is to make sure that we're addressing the urgent issues of today in a way that's also making things better for everybody who's coming in the future. And achieving this vision of a more sustainable, equitable, and resilient future is going to require a lot of courage, a willingness to have hard conversations and get messy, and the empathy to understand different points of view. It's not an easy path, but I can't imagine a better place than to try to reach it than here in Boulder. And I'm ready to help us work together to meet our many challenges. You can learn more about my campaign on my platform at my website, Nicole4FORBoulder.com. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Nicole. Next, we'll hear from Aaron.
Well, Steve, thanks so much for your excellent moderation, and thanks so much to Empower Our Future folks for hosting us. You all are as sharp as it gets on climate issues, and appreciate your advocacy over the years in so many different ways on this. I'm going to bring up one more topic before I'm done. There's the phasing out fracking ballot initiative that's coming next year. I thought we might talk about it, but watch for that. It is going to be a ballot measure at the state level to phase out fracking by the year 2030, and our climate and our air quality demand that action. I have signed on as a supporter, and actually I'll just announce I'm co-hosting a house party to raise funds and get the word out about that ballot initiative next week on October 11th at 5:30 at 1650 Yellow Pine Avenue. So you're all welcome to come join us there to learn more about it. Micah Parkin will be hosting that with me. So anyway, again, thank you so much for your work here. Climate action is required of us. It's an existential threat, right? We can't turn away from the dangers to our children and our grandchildren and our world that are occurring from this. So it has to be at the absolute top of our priority lists as elected officials. And the city of Boulder has a unique opportunity to lead by example in this area. That by reducing our emissions in innovative ways, we can show the rest of the world how it can be done and multiply that impact by many, many times over our own emissions reductions. So thank you all for the amazing work that you have already done in this space, and I look forward to the collaboration and partnership in the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. And now Bob.
Well, I think anyone who tuned in tonight hoping to see a big difference in position between Aaron and Nicole and me was probably sorely disappointed. You've heard us align on just about everything tonight, and that's not surprising because I think we have common values. And so as voters make decisions about who they want to elect for their next mayor, I think you need to look beyond the substantive points, because I think we are in agreement on substantive points, and really look at our experience and our skills. We have a diversity of those here. Nicole is a scientist. Aaron is a software engineer and a small business owner. I'm a retired lawyer and a community leader. We all bring different skills and different experiences to the leadership position that the voters will be selecting. And I think my colleagues and I think each one of us would make a good mayor for our city. And so I think it's a tough choice for our community. I think as our community makes that decision and tries to do its due diligence, I'd recommend that community members look at our respective websites, look at the things we've written over the years, look at the votes we've taken and the things we've said out loud, and make a decision about which of the three of us you believe would make the best leader for our community. The mayor is still one of 9 council members, and we need to work collaboratively with each other. And I think that as you look at what we have said and what we've done and how we've served the community, I think that choices can be made pretty readily about who Boulder's next mayor and next leader should be. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. On behalf of Boulder voters, I would like to thank the candidates for joining us tonight and sharing their positions on climate and energy policy. For our formal closing, I'll turn things back over to Mary.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you so much, Aaron, Nicole, and Bob. We really sincerely appreciate your time when so many people are demanding as much of your time as possible. We're grateful to have had you here this evening. I want to remind everybody also that next week we put the city council candidates on the spot, and we'll hear from all of them. In light of the number of candidates, next week's event will start at 6 and run for 90 minutes. So again, sign up for that on the Empower Our Future website under events. I wanted to take a moment to thank the Empower Our Future communications team members who are integral to making these events happen. Paul Cullen, Chris Hoffman, Julie Zonizer, and Steve Whitaker are all part of this team. My name's Mary Pettigrew, and I hope you will check out this video. And now we have actually 30 videos posted of past Empower Hours on our website at empowerourfuture.org/events. The other thing that we've decided to start asking a little bit sheepishly, but you know, we're hoping you might think it's not a bad idea. If you found this useful and appreciate what Empower Our Future is doing, we'd really love to get a donation of any amount from you if you're inspired. Our mission is to advance a socially just, clean energy economy. And one way we do this is public education, also known as these Empower Hours. So again, we really appreciate your being here. All of you folks who showed up and the candidates, thank you. Good luck campaigning and pace yourselves. You've got a ways to go. Thanks again. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.